Here we are in Generation 3, and what a better way to start than with the best of the three Hoenn starters, Trico. And how is this Generation 5 sprite? Honestly, it's kind of nice. It's a more reformed version of its first sprites, but thinner and better coloring. I like that it has a little twitch to it that resembles a Gickle in a quite cool way. Profile takes a whole new stance. Standing firm facing its opponents gives me a lot of Explorers of Sky flashbacks. This form is a lot better than that mid-run in the air that it seems to have had in the past. Reptile inherits that stance, and while I don't think it looks as good, as I tend to like the bring it on style it's possessed in Gen 4, it's still not bad and shows the little Trico once was in it. And that type of sentiment is cute, but I would just like to see Sceptiles a little more badass than it is. 9 out of 10. Torchic is done kind of basic here. I wish they did a little bit more with legs, since I feel like the standing on one leg is kind of iconic for a Torchic, but they haven't actually done that since the release, so why should I care? Combustion to me is the same way. In the past it has such an action position, but here it's just standing angrily, which part of me likes a lot, but also kind of wish it did a bit more kicking. Blaziken has the best sprite of the three. It's ready for battle and leaning in towards its opponents, ready to take them on. But kind of the same complaint for the other guys. For a Pokemon that's dominant on kicking, there's an extreme lack of leg movement. 6 out of 10. So I heard you like Mudkips. Well, so do I, because honestly, it's hard to not like this little guy. And apparently Game Freak has decided its sprite is perfect since it basically hasn't changed besides slight adjustments. I do enjoy the little hop and mouth movement, which makes Mudkip more puppy-like and even more adorable. Marshtomp is forward, but also just kind of silly about it. Its movement kind of feels like it's showing off its ability to move so many muscles at once, but doesn't feel like it has any actual purpose to those movements other than just to move, which adds to the silliness to me. Swampert honestly to me gets a big upgrade in its Gen 5 sprite. As much as the standing up dumbfounded appearance is past as brought, the on all four ready to pounce look just is so sick to me. Like, it truly makes Swampert look super cool and still a good amount of derp while bringing I can kick your butt look at the same time, which is perfect for Swampert. 9 out of 10. Poochyena in Gen 3 looked rough. Just so much sorrow and grumpiness in its face. But the Gen 5 is a big upgrade to the original appearance. It's slimmed down and angry as well as a little bit less cartoony. The movement is aggressive, but takes a minute to switch to a more curious approach with a sniff in the air. Poochyena is one of my favorite Pokemon, and its Gen 5 sprite, in my opinion, is the best game representation of its presence. Mightyena, I'm a bit disappointed in. They, for some reason, toned down the aggression it had in Gen 4 and just made it do a paw race, which I feel like kind of makes it seem weak and not all that dark. 7 out of 10. Zigzagoon is the best early route rodent. I said what I said. Anyway, its Gen 5 sprite is quite satisfying. Something about it just fits its skeptical but skittish attitude I always pictured for Zigzagoon, though I always find the Gen 4 sprite the funniest one. I'm so glad that Linoon is no longer twisty like in its previous sprites. For a Pokemon that runs straight, it only makes sense that it stays straight. It brings a bit of cuteness into design with the little lift of its front legs that makes me quite pleased. Reminds me of a giant sloth for some reason. 9 out of 10. Wurmple sprite is honestly such a good representation of actual caterpillars, and they put a lot of movement into his sprite, which is just fantastic. Oh gosh, I have to choose now. Actually, wait, no. Suicune and Cascoon are practically the same movement-wise. Besides their obvious difference as Pokemon, they are cocoons through and through, which is fine. Dustox, funnily enough, has never had a sprite change. It's exactly the same since speed. I mean, of course they added movement with the wings, but even then it's simple and just kind of weird. But isn't Dustox just weird anyways? It's not bad by all means, just feels janked and lazy. Same thing can honestly be said for Beautifly, only becoming less faded. But the animation is still janked and rough and kind of hurts my eyes a little. 6 out of 10. I think the funniest thing about Lotad is that it has feet and can stand on the ground perfectly fine, but instead they decided to make it float like it's in water, which I can understand for fish Pokemon, but why are you doing this to Lotad? The sprite itself is also just looks like Lotad is up to no good, which feels off as it's usually a funny little guy. Wombre feels ape-like here, like it's taunting you ready to fight, which is fitting for the most part as most stages tend to be more serious and this just embodies that cool guy mask. Ludicolo actually just feels off. It's so much laggier than other sprites for some reason, like they wanted to do more but couldn't, but it's still a happy dancing little guy, so that is all it's needed in the end. 7 out of 10. Seedom just feels like a Mario character. With the little waddle it does, how could it not? I don't particularly dislike this sprite, but I miss the fun little pose it does in Gen 3. Nuzleaf, I just find boring. It does its typical pose, and the only reason it has movement is to not be stagnant. But otherwise, it doesn't add anything to the sprite. I also am not a big fan of the disconnection of the body and the head. Let me make wind. Is the vibe I get from Shiftry. Man is just using those leaves in the funniest way possible, and non-stop at that. And I kind of love that about it. 7 out of 10. The more I look at Taylor, the more I'm just like, wow, it's a twitchy bird. I don't blame them for making the sprite so bland. I mean, there just isn't that much you can do with it. And realistically, taking in that Gen 4 sprite just doesn't work. It still fits the Pokemon despite not being much to the eye. Swellow, while still being bland, is well done. Improving upon its debut sprites and becoming more ace. It's not so mean, but more just ready to move on to the next thing, as it wants to speed run through everything, which reminds me a lot like me. 7 out of 10. It kinda does exactly what you expect it to. glide in the winds of the sea, and honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. It just gives off such a good annoying sequel presence. And even though it's not an insane touch, I truly do like the little mouth movement it does. Pelipper luckily keeps this kind of attitude from Wingull, which I didn't think they would keep. It just looks extra goofy with the big mouth of it. 10 out of 10. Rolls in Gen 5 is pretty basic. The colors and shading are nice and just does a little shuffle. That is all that it offers. Do I wish it did a little bit more? Of course, but besides maybe a little wave, what more could you do? Curlier goes back to its roots of Gen 3 and becomes more Martian dancer, which isn't bad since his whole premise is to represent a ballet dancer with psychic abilities, and I think it does it pretty well, with that simple little lift and slow fall to show its abilities. Now into Gardevoir. Might have to be careful what I say here. But to be fair, I'm just a bit disappointed they decided to go with the Diamond and Pearl and not its Platinum Sprite. I think its pose is just a little bit cooler and more elegant to this one, where it's just open to the battle. I don't think it's bad by any means, just a bit boring, and to me makes Gardevoir a bit too cute instead of a strong opponent. But that could be all part of an act. Glade has the best sprite of the set. It has a glare that stares into your soul, but also that little smile that scares me a little. But then the animation of the arm extending is just so cool. It's like a cool switch from offense to defense that other sprites don't have, and I just love it. 8 out of 10. Surskit is one of those Pokemon that I've never took that close of a look into. Being based off a water strider, it makes sense that it glides along the ground instead of walks. I don't understand the jump though. I mean, it's a simple little bug with long legs, so there's not much more you could improve on really. Masquerain, which I might be saying wrong, isn't too far off from his past sprites. It does just the generic flying bug movement that we have seen so much in the past. This sprite does however make it look prettier than before, so I will give it that 8 out of 10. Pokemon really do love just making grass type things with feet. Shumish tries to do a little bit more with its sprite regardless. It has a lot of buoyancy in the animation and does make it a bit more excitable in battle despite the angry face it carries, which is a weird contradiction in the Pokemon. Breloom I wish was a little more active. It just feels too stagnant and derpy, which doesn't feel right. One other way I could look at it though is a face of deception. It looks weak and frail, only to bring in the foe closer to unravel its strong attack. But if that were the case, why not make it more like a Gen 3 sprite? I just wish it did more than what it gives. 7 out of 10. Slackoff would have been perfect if they just slowed down the movement a lot more. I understand that it wouldn't fit in with the rest of the game, but I don't care, make it slower. Vigoroth is actually awesome. It'd just be a rambunctious ADHD filled teenager, and I hope to see that in the sprite. Though it would have been funny if they used a Gen 4 sprite and had it sway back and forth a bunch. Slacken embodies its true laziness. It's literally just chilling, scratching its belly. What else could you ask for? Well, it does just sniff its finger in Gen 4, so that would have been funny. 9 out of 10. Hada doesn't do much. I do think the sprite looks nice besides not giving too much change from previous generations. Ninjask is its speedy little self. While not moving as fast as I would expect and kinda wish it vibrated a little bit more, as it holds in that energy to move to stay still, but it does its job, kind of. Shedinja is the best of the three. It just levitates them down, truly showing its dead angelic presence. It fits the concept it holds to the highest of standards. 7 out of 10. Whismur is whimpering. That's all I got. Okay, not true, but I do like how fitting its personality is here. In fact, the whole line kind of does a good job with that, but Whismur specifically is super timid, but in its animation gives off a little bark as if it's backed in a corner, but then resumes its shakiness as if it's known as small but wanted to be loud and brave. Now, Lounger loses the timidness to become kind of crazy and atone to itself, which is shown somewhat in the sprite, but I just wish it gave off a little more than what it does. I feel like Lounger is being held back or tuned down, and I just wish it wasn't. Explode is where things truly change. Instead of becoming brave like it wanted to be as a Whismur, it seems to be more unbothered and intimidating. The sprite quite literally screams, "Get out of my way," like an angry old man. And that is what Explode absolutely should be. 9 out of 10. Akihito has always been a strange Pokemon to me. It's just a bag of something that wants to be a sumo wrestler. I find it weird. Its Gen 5 sprite though is okay. The movement works, however I think the jump is a bit silly and just hard to watch as it seems so unnatural. I also think the stance of the Gen 4 sprite is just way better since it just feels tougher as well. Hariyama on the other hand fits way better. I love the stance and the focus on its big hands instead of its body. I wish there's a bit more feet movement, but like it's limited by the puppet animation sadly. 8 out of 10. Ugh. Why is Nosepass so stiff and boring? It used to be so much more loose and active despite well being a rock inspired by the Eastern Iron statue thingies. But still, it just took his personality and turned it into literal stone. What have they done to this poor thing? Pokepass on the other hand looks great. I like that it just gets bored in the middle and falls to the ground to rest. Maybe to represent getting more dirt, since that is what his mustache is, a little army of dirt magnetized to throw it at its opponents. Which I think added with the little movement makes it feel so much alive as a separate entity, and I really love that about this sprite. 8 out of 10. Skitty is this playful little toy kitten that decided it wanted to be a Pokemon. In Gen 4, it really emphasizes this playful nature by having it in mid-jump along with that extremely happy to see you smile. But for Gen 5 adaptation, they decided to keep it on the ground for a little hop. Its playful nature is also instead shown through its movements, where its stutters make it seem like it wants to play, but for some reason holding back to just stay in one spot, which I kind of find worrisome as I wouldn't expect Skitty to be able to hold itself back. Delcatty became less interested in others and only to itself. However, the sprite just makes it look like a cat moving around, Maybe the bow and tail wag is meant to say leave me alone, but with the limited phase movements, it's hard to see that through. 7 out of 10. Okay, so Sable is that little goblin troll that wants your jewels. That also is partially made out of jewels. I'm writing this super tired and don't want to look at the proper creature it's based off, so I'm just gonna hope I'm right. Anyways, its Gen 5 sprite is good. It's not as devious looking as Respect, but somewhere in its just blank stare and twitching, it somehow works. Like a little demon that's just waiting for you to make the first move to scare the other crap out of you. 10 out of 10. Its main defense is this giant fly trap on its head. Otherwise, it's basically completely helpless. Shown by the way it's always facing against the opponent and looking backwards. While I do like the little playful swing that it has in its Gen 4 sprite, it is sadly taken away in the next gen, but instead replaced with a kind of patient wait until the final snipe, kind of like a real flying trap, which is actually cool to see and I like it a lot. Though the ear looking like a Nintendo with how it looks bothers me a lot. 7 out of 10. The Gen 5 sprite of Aeron makes it look absolutely adorable. I never thought I would be saying that about some pieces of metal attached to each other, but I am. Alright, it's not as cute as Gen 3, but still as cute. The sprite doesn't do much to really enhance Aeron, but it does get a lot more shinier and clean. Also, a bit bigger, which might be just the scaling. Aeron is just an angry dude. Or is playful. Honestly, I don't know what to make from this sprite, as it can go both ways in my opinion. I like it regardless. Aggron is good, looks clean and dominant in the battle stance. It's such a shame how cool this mon looks and just isn't that good in battle, because the way it's portrayed here just makes it look so cool. Something I would definitely want to use on my team. 9 out of 10. I stare at Meditite and honestly just feel meh. Like it's a nice sprite, but it doesn't change anything from previous generations. It just floats and yeah, that is about it. Though looking into its soul is terrifying. Medicham sways and jumps and yeah, same thing, just meh. But really this whole line has always been like that to me, so why would this specific sprite do anything for me? Maybe I was hoping to bring it more pizzazz. 7 out of 10. Electric is always in one mood. Angry dog. Which is fair, so why fix what isn't broken? I do wish the animations abided its speed and electric abilities a little bit more by simply having it move a little bit faster, but overall it's fine sprite that shows it's ready for battle. Electric tones down the need for anger and kind of becomes a guard dog. It's half in city position, which just tells me it's observant and waiting for you to move first. I do kind of wish it looked angrier like with its Gen 4 sprite, which I also think has a better stance. But the sprite has a point of it waiting for lightning instead of being the first to strike. 8 out of 10. Usually I would do single stage Pokemon separately, but these two are such a pair that I feel wrong putting them in separate videos. Plusle is such a happy little fellow in the sprite with its adorable little dance and just constant smile. I like the little touch that is facing left but also being pulled to the right, which makes sense. Since when we get to Minun, it's always facing right but gets pulled to the left. Also, with Minun, it's not as positive, showing it does have some negativity to it, which I think is a cool touch. Anyways, opposites attract and would make sense that these guys would constantly pull towards each other, while also fighting to stay disconnected. Makes them a great duo and for some great sprites. 10 out of 10. Gen 3 really does love their pairs. Sadly to me, Volpe and Illumis have always been forgettable as Pokemon. But whatever I'm judging, the sprite's not the Pokemon. Volpe just looks so uncomfortable in the sprite. It's big and just doesn't seem like its wings could hold it up, but somehow does. It really just doesn't seem happy to be alive, however, and just makes me feel sorry for this little guy. Illumis does seem a bit happy to be alive, but it's still slow and kind of uncomfortable to look at. The animation is so jagged that it feels like Game Freak forgot this Pokemon existed and just wanted to put something together. Unlike Plusle and Mining, these two sadly don't feel well put together here, besides feeling what is a half-assed job. 4 out of 10. Roselia looks like it's done with everything, but then does this little cheerleading cheer as if it's hyped to be here. It gives off such a confusing vibe, and honestly, I like it for that. Its condescendent nature is something I just kind of find funny as well. Budu is absolutely adorable, as it should be. It is energetic, it's just constantly moving with no time to rest. It sure does bounce as well. And, well, deserves nice things in life. Roserade, I believe, should be elegant but fierce, but the constant pose it takes is just pointing. Which, if matched with this Generation 4 sprite, would look cool as hell, but they don't do that. I'm impressed by just how smooth the flow of its body is, however, making it not so bad. 8 out of 10. There isn't much you could really do with Vulpin. I mean, it's literally a green blob with kissy lips. I still like the thing regardless. High Arrow claimed that it doesn't open its mouth. I always feel like it's one of the biggest perks in the anime is how big it can open its mouth. And here it doesn't. I guess it doesn't in any game, but still. Fallout, same thing, should have its mouth open. But instead it just wants to keep moving forward towards something, which it really needs to show. 6 out of 10. Gen 4 Corvana looks so tough and cool. I guess the Gen 5 sprite does as well, but it just doesn't have that same intimidation factor. Trust me, I'd still be scared if I saw this guy, but it just looks kind of goofy up close. Maybe if they just tilted it a bit sometimes, it would work better. Torpedo looks like it's kind of scared, and like it wants to get away from something. Something about it also just gives me a look of terror instead of making me afraid of it. While the Gen 4 sprite just is a bit more intimidating with the same pose, it somehow looks scarier. Like how people are afraid to join my Discord channel. Link in description. 7 out of 10. So much Gen 5 sprite truly does just embody a goofy beach ball, with its mouth looking like it's eating its own lips super slowly. To the little just swimming wiggle it does, Wilmer is just adorable here and I can't think of any ways to improve it. With Willow we get a more forward facing sprite unlike its Gen 3 one, where we mostly get underbelly. It honestly feels like a C forward facing cartoon character. kind of disturbing, but also works. Or I'm not like too disturbed. Animation wise, it doesn't do much, and yeah, I don't have much more to say. 8 out of 10. If you enjoy these shorts, think about becoming a member. Okay, bye. Has always been a little dopey guy, just traversing through the volcanoes as a little volcano. Though it feels less interesting and just kind of boring. Not that there was much to Numel, but I think with Gen 4 sprite, its body facing away from the fight despite it facing the enemy kind of shows its unawareness. It can see the danger and wants to move in away instead of fight, a characteristic you don't really see much in a Pokemon sprite. While in Gen 5, it's ready for the fight and makes it more like everyone else. While Camerupt has always had the same pose, its head is actually what changes the most. It does this little up and down charge and then a head shake as if trying to intimidate the enemy like a bull would. Now I have no idea if camels do that, but cows do, and it's kind of more cow now. However, I don't agree with the aggression, and I think it should have been slower head tilt to show its unawareness, like in Gen 4 where it slightly tilts its head. I think it's too aggressive and should fit its ability more. Not that the sprites are bad, I just have a different opinion on what they should be. 6 out of 10. Torkoal is such a cool Pokemon. I am not biased at all just because it's a turtle. Okay, I am. But holy crap, do all the sprites look cool as hell. The Gen 4 sprite is just something amazing. It feels like you have awakened a beast. Something that's just absolutely big and terrifying. It just looks awesome. Now, I wish the Gen 5 held that stance, because while it still looks scary, the way it frames his face make it lose a little bit of that intimidation, and more like a worry old man, which fits it alright, but still not as cool as Gen 4. And something I think they missed out on. 8 out of 10. Okay, so the first thing I noticed with Spoink is that for whatever reason, its nose is smaller than it is in Gen 3. That or his head just gets bigger. I'm not truly sure, to be honest. Anyways, its sprite is good. I do think, however, the proportion of head to spring seems a little bit off. But besides that, it does what Spoink does best and just continues to bounce. And what more could you ask for? Young Pig scares me a little, mainly because it now feels more human than Pig than what it represented in his Gen 3 sprite. Feels like more some guy in a costume with stiff arms than an actual pig. Though it does feel better proportionally, which is always an improvement. But I can't get over the humanoid side to it. Kind of freaks me out. 6 out of 10. Honestly, kind of disappointed in the Spinda sprite. Spinda is supposed to be a super dizzy and unbalanced Pokemon, yet here it just moves very slowly back and forth, and goes on one leg for, what, a second? It just doesn't come off as something that is going to fall over at any time. Instead, it's kind of lackluster and boring. I get there are like 3 million different variants of this little guy, but the sprite just doesn't do Spinda justice. 3 out of 10. Trapinch gets a big emphasis with his head in the Gen 5 sprite. I do think it would be funny if the mouth opened wider, as if to bite something, rather than just open a little like it's trying to say hi, but I can see why they didn't go to that path, and just left the animation simple, which works for a little Trapinch. Vibrava is a bit more grounded, and honestly that is better fitting for the Pokemon that could barely fly anyways. I do wish it had more wing movement, as that it's a big part of its character and attack style, but I do think the sprite itself is so well done and makes Vibrava look cool, even if I do like the Gen 4 sprite a little bit more. I hate to say it, but I think Gen 5 Flygon is the weakest Flygon sprite. Gen 3, it's a bit simple, but feels like a bug, while Gen 4, it does the funny little flow back, which makes sense as it uses its wings and sounds to attack. While Gen 5, it just looks like a fairy. A dumb little fairy that wiggles its toes back and forth and bows to the attacker. It just doesn't make sense to me. Also, the wings just don't flow well where I think it could fly like that. I like Flygon, but man, did they butcher this design for it. 7 out of 10. It's kind of hard to rate these little round guys because I can't even picture what you can do to improve it, or update its sprite to make it better. Cacnea is one of those guys. Just a little round guy who does what most of them do. Hop and, well, move its arms, when they have them. It's good, I just don't have much to say, however. Cacturn, I can work with. And it does what Cacturn does best, standing like a cactus waiting for prey to come near it. The little sway back and forth makes it menacing face even more, well, menacing. And I think they did a great job. 9 out of 10. Swablu is adorable. I mean, it's literally just a bird with cloud wings, so how could it not be? It has probably one of the most realistic wing flaps we've seen, and does, well, not much else. So in a way, it's moderate. I will always find it funny that Altaria goes from an active flyer and ready for battle attacker in Gen 4 to, well, just wanted to sit and chill in Gen 5. I presume they were too lazy to animate its wings, but I just don't get why it has to sit. Not that it looks bad, it just looks a bit silly and, well, lazy. 7 out of 10. Zangoose's Gen 5 sprite kind of blends together with its Gen 3 and Gen 4 sprite. It starts with a tilt forward like in Gen 4, when it later blends backwards going into the Gen 3 sprite, which is for a brief moment, but it does look good regardless. I do wish it did a little bit more with his claws instead of pretending it could take a hit, but I guess that's just part of the character. Anyways, I like it. 8 out of 10. Seviper is a bit disappointing. I get this Pokemon's forgettable, and while I have grown a little attached to it from my Mystery Dungeon randomized run, it still should do more. It just doesn't seem scary or intimidating or out for blood. It doesn't even open its mouth to pull a little hiss at the opponent. It just wiggles and not even cool like. 4 out of 10. Lunatone is a set with Solrock 100%. They are the moon and the sun, and pop up and down let is literally it. They have not changed really at all since their debut, and they are quite literally the best they could possibly make these sprites be. I just don't see any other way to prove them or critique them. They are the sun and the moon. 10 out of 10. Barboach used to look so cool back in the day. They just had a lot of personality in the position, and as if it's flying out of the water saying, "What's up?" in Gen 3. But now they just made him bland old noodle boy, who just swims with his tail moving back and forth and not much else. No thoughts going on behind those eyes. Wishcash has somehow made its eyes wider. He's just so happy to be alive, but also can't see straight, and has no thoughts, so had no reason to not be happy. Kinda weird he was the smarter one in Mystery Dungeon, but they really just wanted to focus on the doofy little face of it, and they did a wonderful job. 8 out of 10. Cornfish's Gen 5 sprite is truly simple. It does the classic crab walk and wiggles his claws up and down. I do wish it would pinch his claws, as I think it is more fitting for his personality, but that might just be me. I still like it. The simplicity works well with this design. Crawdon actually gets darker red in the sprite, which I think is a massive improvement as it isn't blinding my eyes anymore. I guess to pinch his claws, unlike Corfish, which makes me upset because it is possible, but they do a good job and still keeps the simplicity Corfish had. 9 out of 10. The limitations of the animation style kinda doesn't work with Baltoy, as it wants to twist and turn, but gets stuck just tilting side to side. I don't really like how stiff it is, to be honest, and I wish it did a little bit more with its arms and movement. As Dreidels spin and not just slowly lose balance every once in a while. Same with Cladle. The arms moving out and hovering works perfectly, but it is missing the iconic spin in it. Its arms just need to do more than hover on the sides, and be more fun with more movement. The sprite doesn't look bad, just the animation just drags it down. 6 out of 10. Honestly, the biggest change and improvement with the Gen 5 sprite is just the coloring of Lily. It used to be a lot brighter pink and purple, while now it's a nice darker and not as blinding color, which makes it fit in with the Gen 5 graphics as they push the DS's limits with them. The animation is a soft little tilt back and forth, and then a head screech, which honestly is completely suitable for this creature. Cradily also gets a darker pink with its neck worm things. I do however wish the head had a little bit more movement, as it's weird to see such a long neck so stiff with that curvature. The rest of the animation is smooth and I like it, just needs more neck movement. It also takes away a little bit of the silliness that Cradily has to me. 8 out of 10. I guess Game Freak has decided that Anorith is perfect since it hasn't changed at all since it's released. But besides maybe changing the angle, there isn't much you could do with this guy, I guess. And I'd rather see it from above than below. The animation is simple, and I like that each feather or scale moves separately from each other, creating a cool wave effect. Our model really feels like a bug with a coat of armor on it. The way it moves is so loose from the stiff outer exterior that it makes it a little weird to watch, but I also kind of like it a lot more at the same time. 9 out of 10. Feebas, despite being ugly, I guess is more elegant than Magikarp as it doesn't want to go on its side, though in Gen 4 it does do a little tilt, so close enough. Anyways, its Gen 5 sprite is nice. It has the weirdest mouth animation out of every Pokemon, and I think it's the only fish to do this. Like, not even Goldeen did, if I remember correctly. So that is actually pretty cool. And the swimming animation flows nicely, but still shows it as a weak fish, which is cool. I looked at kind of takes the gracefulness of it in his Gen 3 sprite, and the power of his Platinum sprite, and kind of mixes them together to make this. Which looks good, but the angle of the tail kind of ekes me out a little, as I can't imagine it staying bent like that. And the animation just makes it feel like it's in pain. I just wish it did a better job of making the combo look powerful and elegant. 6 out of 10. Castform is such a cute little ball with the big ball hands. I like that it literally just moves like the water cycle, which I think is a nice touch as it's also just a cloud that changes forms. Though I am a little disappointed that each form doesn't have an animation that matches the element it turns into, despite them all having a unique one, which I understand why they don't, but it would have been a nice touch to have. They also look super nice as well. 8 out of 10. Echo is a little disappointing. You would think it would move a little faster and be a bit twitchy with its appearance, but instead it moves slowly like it's trying to climb a tree that isn't there. The tongue reaching out is awesome, and I like that a lot, but it just doesn't feel right with the rest of its appearance being so slow. It's kind of a bit too derpy. Maybe I'm wrong though, and it's supposed to be slow, but I really feel like it isn't right. 5 out of 10. Shuppet in Slime is definitely one of my favorite ghost types, and I think in Gen 5, they made it Shuppet look awesome. It goes from a cold-staring no-mouth sheet in Gen 3, which still looks great, to a more eye-open, silly, but scary little guy. It has so much personality in its animation with the tongue and the pullback that it does, which I'm surprised they were willing to do for this little guy. Banette sadly doesn't get the same treatment with his animation. It looks good with the little sway and the menacing smile, but I wish it did it a little more. I, however, could be thinking about it all wrong since it's a ghost of a doll. And if you think about it, just standing there swaying in the wind, then yeah, Banette is scary in this sprite. Maybe I'll just go with that. 9 out of 10. Duskull comes off as very elegant in Gen 5 sprite. I do like that they incorporated the Diamond and Pearl and Platinum sprites together to make this sprite, since both work well for the personality of Duskull. Dusclops takes a forward stance and it just looks like it's standing still with the wind moving through it. I wish it did a little more with the arms instead of having them so stiff in one place. Like maybe make them do circles or just anything, since it's such a big feature of Dusclops. So it's a little sad it seems to do nothing for it. With how much emphasis they have on Dustro's mouthpiece in the middle and every other media, You would think it would move instead of just being drawn on. But nope, the eyes circling and just constantly confusing wobbling just makes me feel bad for this guy instead of actually scared of it. Which is a shame since it should be scary, but it's not. If it just opened its mouth, then I think that fear factor will play out better as well. 7 out of 10. Tropius looks very bold in a Gen 5 sprite. Its puffed out chest and just stern demeanor gives it off something you would be scared to battle. Of course its stats are crap, so it's not actually a hard fight sadly, but you wouldn't believe that from this sprite. I do think that my favorite sprite for it is this Diamond and Pearl sprite because it's just so silly to me, and I would definitely use this Tropius. But overall, its Gen 5 sprite is good in its own stern way. 8 out of 10. I don't know why, but writing this review, my brain convinced itself I have already reviewed Chimecha, even though I have no proof of doing so. Anyhow, I like the sprite Chimecha. The swing of its clapper, I think that's the proper word for it, moves exactly like a ringing bell or having a strong wind gust against it. Makes the illusion of it just hanging and going with the flow, which is awesome as it's what should be a wind chime. Jingling is also well done. Being just like a round boy I talk about a lot, they do a good job giving it the personality of its lore. It moves like a bell on a sleigh or an instrument in its little fall, which I think is a nice touch to the sprite, while also remaining bouncy and cute. And also proves you can do something with the little round guys. 10 out of 10. Absol looks super cool in Gen 5, and I think this pose and movement is super fitting, as it is only set to appear when a natural disaster or something bad is going to happen, but also doesn't like to battle, despite what people may say. So it taking its stance of kind of intimidating but keeping a distance I think works really well. Though I do think it loses some of its fear factor, like some of its past gen sprites, which would make people truly fear it. It does keep that scary presence going though. 9 out of 10. Nora is one of those Pokemon I keep forgetting about and then get confused when I see it. It's just this weird, mischievous triangle cone thing. I don't know what the exact lore is, but they definitely took Conehead and Jawas and decided to combine them. And, well, the sprite shows that off extremely well. Clearly has really odd teeth, and I don't know how I never noticed that before. But it's a rock that floats and shakes, and yeah, that's what the sprite represents. The mouth movement freaks me out a little bit, but besides then, it's good. Frostlass is cold and mysterious, and well, nothing like the other two. I don't know the exact lore of Frostlass, but it gives its presence in such an elegant but frozen way that I think it works perfectly for what it is. You don't know what it's truly thinking or going to do, and I like that a lot. 8 out of 10. Oh yes, the adorable little spherical Spheal. It is almost perfect. They got the glistening little eyes, the adorable teeth, and happy mouth movements, but there's just one thing that it lacks, that I believe it needs. That is to roll a little. Even just a little back and forth swivel would made it perfect, but no, they decided not to do it. So close, yet so far. Celio loses a lot of weight in its Gen 5 sprite. I don't know if it could just be the angle, but the dude was plump in its first appearances. So what did they do to lose so much weight? Guess we'll never know. Anyways, the sprite is good. It could be a bit more jolly in its movements since his face gives off such a happy guy, but oh well. Walrein is definitely a major presence on the battlefield. It's big and silly, and I remember it being scarier. Honestly, I kind of feel bad since the sprite never closes his mouth for more than a second. Like, let the dude use his nose. I know walruses are perfectly capable of mouth closing. I keep getting distracted this video. 7 out of 10. Why does Clamperl get to do the little roll thingy but not Spheal? Anyways, Clamperl is nice. It's basically what you would expect it to do with just a pearl and a clam. I like that it gives the clam part a bit of personality with the movement and the slight closing of the gap. Huntail is sleek and its usual goofy, creepy water-dwelling swelf. It only bothers me a little that doesn't look like it's swimming with how stiff it is, as it's supposed to be swimming, but maybe that's just how he does it. A bit weird, but he could be better. Now, Corvus is definitely out of water. It looks like it's more flopping around than trying to swim in the water. I honestly think the design is just weird, but I also feel like these sprites were half-assed and could be dramatically better. 5 out of 10. Relicanth is a living fossil for a Pokemon. Being based off the Coelacanth lives off the coast of Madagascar, which was thought to be once extinct. I only know that because I played a ton of Marine Park Empire and they had Coelacanth in that game and I thought they were cool. Anyways, Relicanth is literally just a more rocky version of that. The sprite makes it look like it just wants a snack and is looking for food, rather than, you know, getting ready for battle. But I guess that makes sense. Living for so long, you probably don't want to battle, so why not just look for food? Anyways, it's a good sprite for Relicanth and fits personality well. 9 out of 10. I find it hilarious that the last Pokemon in the decks before Pseudo and Legendaries is Luvdisc. Anyways, Luvdisc's Gen 5 sprite is a little underwhelming when it comes to animation. It barely moves, and while I like the touch on the mouth movement to represent kissing, or just a normal fish thing I guess, it could just use a little more swivel in swimming. Otherwise, the sprite is good. I like the darker pink it got, and overall how the angle shows everything you need to see for such a simple design. But it could be way better with the animation. 6 out of 10. Bagon looks so content in his Gen 5 sprite until it decides to hit you with that little attack squirrel. I think I would like to see more arc movement, as its dream is to fly, and have it flap its arms would be a cool reference to that. But I like the little angry movement it holds, trying to prove itself more powerful than it is. Shogun's sprite is good. I mean, it's a cocoon-like state, so what do you expect from such a calm-down creature? The little stutter is a nice touch to show it's still alive and bursts in to explore its last form. Salamence keeping his mouth open is funny to me. It's nothing new, it's done in every single sprite it's been a part of, but still I think the boldness and power it had in its Gen 4 sprite seems to disappear if it's Gen 5 run. It still comes off powerful, but I just think the angle makes it seem less powerful and intimidating. Also kinda missed the coloring it loses from Gen 3. Something about that more purplish looks makes it feel more dragon to me. Also it's finally got its wings, and it's barely using them. That I would like to see a little bit more movement in. 7 out of 10. It's so weird to look at Beldum here because you can really now see that it's just an arm waiting to find its attachment. Like even its eye is more of a socket for fitting than an eye. Even its movement is just back and forth of an arm. It's so weird to see, but I think Gen 4 represents it best with being more of a shoulder and arm down kind of appearance. Matang claws and face adjust, and yeah, that's basically it. I think it's weird to see its eyelid kind of move, as metal bending like that is weird to me. I would expect it to stay more stagnant. Not that it isn't cool character touch to show the anger in its attack, I just wouldn't expect it. Metagross is a tanky beast, and it makes it aware of such. It moves with such force to show how much strength it is in its arm and its movement, while also feeling like extremely robotic. It really shows off that power, and I like it a lot. 8 out of 10. Regirock and, well, the rest of the Regis are meant to be sturdy and in place, so it makes sense that it just looks solid and not loose. But yeah, for Regirock, they kind of did make it look not as stiff. Each rocky part tends to move as their own, and it actually looks pretty cool. Something I didn't expect from it. 9 out of 10. Regice, being the element of ice, makes sure that it comes off as a thick layer of ice, but also a bit slippery. Not every joint is able to control it due to its lack of physical resistance to each other, and they do a good job portraying the slipperiness of the ice, especially on its feet. Though I do think they missed a chance to hit the sick pose it does in Gen 4. 9 out of 10. Registeel doesn't have the greatest history of sprites. But anyways, its Gen 5 sprite is kind of funny to me. It's like the dude is trying to play an electric keyboard and pull out a masterclass act of nothing. I kind of like it, but also wish it just did a little bit more to be interesting to the eye. Like the little dance attempts to perform in Gen 3. Man just wants the Macarena there. 7 out of 10. Latias and Latios are meant to contrast each other, but also still have a bit of a difference. For example, these two sprites, one is facing down and one is facing up, but I think one thing they should have done is them facing in different directions as well. They can do it, they have done it in the past, but I think it would be more fitting to see them in double battles. That way they work together, but also still want to be differentiated from each other. Otherwise, the sprites are good, the animations show their speed and flying abilities, but besides that, they don't do much else. I might be focusing on the difference too much, but it's what I do. 7 out of 10. As a kid, Kyogre was my choice. I remember playing Pokemon Sapphire as a kid, and finally reaching this bad boy to only throw a netball at it and somehow catch it first try. It was sick. Sadly, I lost the cartridge of Sapphire and never found it. Anyways, here we are to talk about the sprite. And I think Kyogre looks great in its Gen 5 essence. It moves, it spins slowly but with great power, and that stare down at the opponent would scare anyone that it faces. I think it really shows why it's the king of the seas and the reason for its current creation. 10 out of 10. Groudon is big and menacing. Over the years I thought we'd lose more interest in it, but it hasn't happened. The way it moves gives it such swagger and such intensity, it feels like the earth is shaking in its presence. Though I do miss the angry, "You wanna go bro?" it does in Gen 4, and in Gen 5 it's more closed off and serious, unlike a school bully it gives in the past. I would not want to mess with this guy, and they do a great job showing that. 10 out of 10. With Rayquaza in Gen 5, they bring the more natural feeling idle pose. Unlike in Gen 4, where it's attack stance, and that just doesn't look comfortable to stay in for too long. It just looks more comfortable and natural in its current state. Sadly, its animation shows the lack of its power as a sky god and keeper of the peace on Earth. This isn't me hating on Rayquaza, just feel like they lost the presence it had in its past sprites. I think it mainly has to do with the way they framed its mouth to be way more softer than it was before. It's not yelling at its children anymore, and can finally relax. 8 out of 10. I think Jiraiya's Gen 5 sprite is the most boring of its sprites. In Gen 3 it pushes back with its eye open and ready to dodge and attack. In Gen 4 it moves like a shooting star in a battle. In Gen 5 however, it just sits there and hovers. It doesn't even do anything with its middle eye, a small detail with a lot of story to its power. It doesn't have to fully open it, but at least have it more a little bit to give it a little bit more character. Could just be wishful thinking, but I wish it had more magic to it. 5 out of 10. Deoxys got the same treatment as Jirachi. Each form used to have such a personality and transforms into the stat it was meant to represent, especially its pose. But all got replaced for a simple item mission and stand straight up. Like you expect them to believe this guy is ready to attack, or this guy is ready to take a hit, or this guy is ready to run. Like look at these poses carefully and see how they show what I just said, compared to this. I know the animations add a bit of work to making these work, but come on, you had such a great examples. What happened? 4 out of 10.